Welcome to Skystrology's podcast. In this episode, I had the pleasure to speak with Jade, a Western astrologer and human design consultant, about her reasons for deciding to study Skystrology. Welcome, Jade, to
Hello.
the podcast. Hi, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to speak about astrology and what you've been doing and what your future plans are. So, could you tell us a little bit about your journey so far?
Yes, and thank you for having me on today to share. My journey going way back actually began in marketing. I'm originally from New York City, and I was playing the role of trying to figure out what I needed to do in life, to live that life that was the approval of what others expected me to be. And interestingly enough, I was working this job that I really didn't like for the longest time. And I would spend my lunch breaks really unhappy and wanting to discover my purpose. And so I would go to Barnes and Nobles across the street, and I would hide in the astrology self-help section. And that's where I really got to start learning about astrology. I started really getting into like a lot of those, like understanding like the Myers-Briggs and different tools and resources that kind of help you understand yourself. And astrology was my epiphany at the time, like really understanding that I was in the wrong field, doing the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
I met an astrologer overseas who is based in Australia, and he was also a psychologist. So his first reading of my chart was like really eye-opening for me, because there was a lot in there where I really discovered like, this is a resource that you can use to not only like understand yourself, but understand your patterns, and how to evolve through it. So with his help and his insights and kind of guiding me towards like how to like learn astrology for myself, I really started deep diving into the mechanics of it. But at the time it was Western, because that was the most popular, right, information that was out there. And I really just, it was the crux of me leaving New York City and venturing out halfway across the country on my own to really discover myself. Over time, I was just doing it as a passion, as a hobby, and people really benefited from the readings I was giving them, that I ended up making it my full-time business. And like mustered up the courage to leave behind like a job that just wasn't really fulfilling me. And then like really explored going down the astrology realm, that astrology, like the astrologer entrepreneurship realm. And for a while, like it was really, I saw it as a benefit. I saw a lot of things that people were really resonating with. But I also ended up having like a metamorphosis journey with astrology itself. I'd say more so in the last year. So I would say beginning. Do you want me to go into that?
Yeah, can I just ask you, because I'm so curious.
Sure.
What years were these where you were going to Barnes and Nobles, and
Okay, yeah.
what were like really impactful for you? Which writers?
Whew. Yeah. So I'd say like I first really started discovering astrology back in 2012. No surprise. 2012 was really when I was like kind of in the beginning of a dark night almost, hitting a wall and not really knowing where to turn to. And so I was really looking at the horoscopes and got intrigued by it, and then started studying it. But then I kind of tabled it and didn't really pick it back up until about 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. 2016 was when I met the astrologer in Australia, who kind of changed my life, and pointed to some things in my chart that I really needed to look at. Mm-hmm. Specifically around Moon and Chiron. But then from there in 2017 was when I totally left the bird's nest and moved away from home. Mm-hmm. And then 2019 was when I really like started my full-time entrepreneurship and left the working world right before the pandemic hit.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah, like maybe like 6 months before, things really started to get a little crazy in the world. And then 2021, I'd say the beginning of 2021 was when I started, or around the spring. So around March, 2021 was when I started to feel this pull to go back into the cave almost. Like, I was going through again, another mini awakening that I was having internally, and I was starting to like no longer identify with some of these modalities, and I wasn't understanding why. It's like it was such a, I don't know if oxymoron's the right word, but it was interesting because, I was looking at the Western astrology, kind of mapping my transits, and according to Western astrology, my Pluto's on the midheaven, transiting that. So I was like, this would make sense why I'm feeling like this transformation happening in my career front, right? And like going back to like, this doesn't resonate with me anymore. What am I being told to do differently? So I closed my books for a while, for almost a year, and needed to go back to square one, trying to figure out like, what is my message now to, what is my service now to the world, right? And what I was finding the trouble with Western astrology at the time, I'd say in modalities in general, because I also have a background in human design, so not just astrology, but what I was finding was that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, people were finding it really beneficial, but what I was finding, the challenge was that people were getting so hooked on, needing to know the answers through this thing, like unable to find the answers within themselves, and really like having this codependent relationship with these resources to be the crystal ball that gives them the answers. And I don't operate that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting another FaceTime call. Is that you?
No, it's my silly phone. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't operate that way. Looking into the crystal ball and telling people their future, because that's not how it works, right? It's everyone's, own self-sovereignty to find those answers within, and that's just how I've always operated. So when I found that, that the way that I was offering my services wasn't really how people were wanting to use those tools and support systems, I felt like I needed to reposition my messaging. And that required me pretty much like closing my books, taking that time to really just be with myself and heal, and also figure out how am I using these tools? Because how I'm using these tools too, right? Like redefine how I guide my clients to use them.
Right.
And so I've explored other things like the Tolkien 13 moons, like the 13-month calendar with Mayan astrology. I've looked at sidereal astrology, Vedic as well, even the 13 signs. I always feel that connection to the star system. Mm-hmm. And I am Gaia's child. Like, I love nature. I feel so connected to the land of nature. Like, a lot of my messages and synchronicities come from just being in the heart of nature. So discovering Skystrology like really opened me up to like, it was like another mind-blowing, like, wait a minute, this is where it's always been, natural time, and in the way that like if we think about evolution and our ancestors and the indigenous people, like the primary way of like connecting with the earth, connecting with the sky, and learning about, how we truly map the star system, how we truly read the constellations. That was another like awakening after the fact, after I had decided to take a break from like all these different tools and resources.
Right.
Now, I will.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
You said, because I'm so fascinated also by Mayan and Vedic. So you were saying that you explored these when you took a break, right? Or you were
Yeah.
before?
I was exploring them. I had been exploring them for a while, but when I took the break, I was like, I need to understand, like, I really need to go back and relearn all this stuff because, like, the Mayan is different. It gives me a different signature, right? It doesn't really go off of, at least the tool that I use doesn't, it goes off a completely different calendar, but based off of completely different energy signatures. Whereas like Vedic sidereal is it's more similar to Western astrology in the sense like you're still working with the planets, you're still working with the asteroids. It's just it moves, everything shifts right back. Um, and I'll say that one thing to add that's really important is that I was having a conversation on Instagram. So I had a friend, her name's Jenna, who really also helped me kind of like usher me into like exploring Skystrology because I had been posting. I'm like, I really feel connected to astrology still. Like this system, I still feel very much connected to it. And maybe it's in a different way in which I teach it or use it, right, as a guide. And I was trying to figure out how do I incorporate this into my offerings, into my practices that's going to serve people in an uplifting way where they're not getting so caught up on, you know, something outside of themselves to define them. How can I really help people like use this as a system to evolve and expand? And I had this like, it started off as like a debate, but I love debates because it really kind of gets you leaning in and learning, right? And learning from the other perspective. And Jenna was going down her pathway of like, you know, learning about Skystrology too. And so she educated me on that. And then I found you through our mutual friend, Eliza. And so even our discussion that we had about a month ago, like really opened me up to like connecting the dots further.
I
So
love that. I love
yeah.
it because, you know, because it begins so organically with you questioning things, with you wanting to serve your community in authenticity or in integrity. And so,
Mhm.
what we, you know, like we are, this, if any other time in our living history, this is the time where we are waking up to a lot of things, where we are asking questions, and actually where you started um, practicing around that time. And then of course 2020, where we had time, a lot of people got into astrology during 2020.
Yeah.
And we
Mhm.
had that time to start asking questions and to kind of take a break from the material kind of rat race, doing the same thing, repeat, and think about, well, actually, what do I want to do or what's happening? And kind of having time for ourselves to think about, you know, where are we now? And reevaluating life as a whole. So that's, you know, what I love about people pushing the envelope and being inquisitive about, well, why do I feel a call to add something else? You know, we're forever growing. We you know, we can still grow. We're not physically growing if we're adults, but we are growing spiritually, you know. And so by being curious, just to pose the question, for me is the first big step. And that seems that then the answer will come right with that,
Mhm.
you know, because you, it is what you ask for, what you focus on, right? And
Mm.
when your initial idea was to be able to serve people and to make sense of this, was how you know, came about now, you know, being one of the first astrologers that will learn Skystrology. And the reason that it's such a big thing um, for me is because I had that journey, you know, not as a teacher, but, you know, 40 years ago almost,
Mm.
with the New York astrologer Lenore Cantor, who was quite well known and who was a psychologist as well. And even though I moved to Europe, I would go back to see her every year I went home. And so I had these, you know, these ideas about something's happening in the sky. Not everything's happening on the ground, which I think
Right.
is a beautiful thing when you wake up to astrology. And most people who are curious about astrology, they're curious because there's something within them that knows this isn't everything. There's something else, right? And so when we are looking for that something else, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of different philosophies and things that, people wake up to. And mine was astrology at the time. And I used to carry the ephemeris around and thinking, and I was telling all my friends, it's so mathematical, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, yeah. They didn't really believe me. But then when I found out that that book wasn't mathematical, then I had to relook at what was true. And it took me 3 years of kind of being in shock and not wanting to do anything with astrology. I wasn't an astrologer at all. I was a hat designer. And by chance, or as the universe had it, it was through meeting people and who worked with the Farmer's Almanac that since the 1800s actually says where the moon actually is. So because that's how they can tell the tides, and also people who garden by the moon. And that was that scientific, actual physical proof of there's a connection between above and below was what got me to then open up my my interest again to astrology. And kind of similar, it's kind of a way of journey of looking at true sidereal. First I woke up actually to 13th sign, and I never really get a chance to talk about my journey with people, and I did with Raw Goddess, who is a 13th sign astrologer, and she's been, working with that for a really long time and everything. And I was like, when you first get it, it's like, whoo, what? It's like, I had no Libra in my sky, and I was like, what's that? Like, oh, what's a fucus? I mean, it takes a while. And that was just, what I find that was great. She was really knowledgeable, but a lot of the times it's like she says, oh, this and this, this is how you are. And, she was just kind of leading me to wake me up about the 13th sign, because I had 3 planets, or like the moon's not a planet, in the 13th sign, 3 heavenly bodies in the 13th sign. And she was telling me she had some too, and she's a really, really sweet person. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. But I didn't get, like, I wasn't really connected, if you will. And I think that was around 2016 or 2015, 14, something like that. 2014, I think it was, around them. And then of course, I went online seeing if I could find some explanation. And there's like this like really like far out 13 sign astrologer. He's like really out there. He's been talking about this for years, and you get like, whoa, it's so like far out, this 13th sign stuff. It's so deep and crazy in a way, and I was like, whoa, that's just like so far. And then I found, and it was, during the time I was waking up to a lot of stuff as well. And then I found True Sidereal with his Aten Clementi's page, and he was talking about the 13th sign, and he had his way of doing things, which is like the midpoints between the 2 constellations that he does. And he developed a whole system and calculation, which is True Sidereal astrology. And at that time, I didn't really know the difference between it, but I just felt the way that he presented things more energetically and without this, may I say, jargon that I find prevalent in Western astrology. right? So
Right.
talking more relaxed about energy, not like you're gonna feel anxious and you blah blah. And it's like,
Yeah. The
whoa,
fear
calm
based.
down,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
it's true. It's like, oh, you're gonna. It's like, whoa. It's so it was so welcome to listen to how he explained the energies. And so I followed him for quite some time. And then what happened was my mother got sick and I had to start taking care of her. And long story short, we ended up in Egypt just like by, by chance for a little while, and then ended up loving it. And then I ended up moving my mother there. And then I had to keep working in London and go back and forth. But when I was there for, a big length of time, as respite, I would go and look at the stars. And of course, then I had the app, and I loved, there was like playground of stars in the middle of nowhere, and no light pollution and no
Yeah.
buildings high enough, like everything right on the Red Sea. And that's when, and also during the daytime, I could go see the sunrise every day. It rains there twice a year. So there's hardly any clouds, maybe clouds 5 times a year in the sky. And I could see the moon rise as the sun set. And it was just like amazing to feel a part of nature, to really be in the middle of the dance of the stars and the heavenly bodies and Venus, when you see the crescent moon and the wandering star Venus and that thing. And so, yeah, that's where I really woke up to the sky and would literally stargaze, go to the top of the building and just look at one star and just be curious. And it's just such a different relationship when we look
Yeah.
back at that's the connection, like we were talking about before, with the ancestors, and realizing, like I was saying, going back to how did this all start, right? Going back to how this all starts, and then reconnecting with ourselves as well, right? And so when people say, there's some people now, they say that Skystrology is true sidereal, and it's like, well, not really. It's not the language that is used in Skystrology, and it's not the calculation, but it's about a certain connection to source, which we all have. And we
Right.
call ourselves, actually, in Skystrology, reconnectors, right? Because everyone has their unique gifts and their abundance, and it's due to basically the programming, and the basic programming, but also the media programming and the generational programming, that I guess people do look for someone to say, oh, this is going to happen to you, or that, because
Right.
it helps them to feel that they have something that actually connects to them, because they go to astro.com and they put in their birth date and they put in their time, which is unique to them, and they want to get something unique out of it. Yeah.
Yep. That's hitting. Yep. That's hitting on definitely what I've experienced in myself too, right? And initially why I was looking at Western astrology to, like, it's just that mindset of needing something to confirm what's in us all along. Sometimes we're afraid of making our own decisions, right? So we want to see it clear in front of us, like, that this thing is telling me this is what I should do. But I love what you said about, like, reconnecting back with the ancestors, with the earth, like really being out into nature, really looking up, like you said, at the sky and seeing it, being with it. Like, that is your connection to source right there, rather than looking at a screen.
I know.
You know what I mean?
They don't call it heaven for nothing.
Right.
It's just so in plain sight. That was like my big thing when I sat one day on the sand on the Red Sea and was looking up and seeing that the moon had risen in Taurus, when everybody and all the media and all the posts and everything was saying it was Gemini. And I was like, why
Yeah.
would anybody, like, because it's amazing to see literally the stars rise out, because they move 1 degree every 4 minutes. So you could literally, from 1 minute to the next, go, oh, it's over there. Like, it's coming. I used to literally watch the moon rise and the stars with it, and in the, clarity. So to see that, and then, be in the middle, I just felt like I was really in the womb of the universe. And this voice, or I don't know, like how it works, but it's just something, because I wasn't brought up religious or, big religious influence. Something said they're hiding God. And I was like, whoa.
It's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like they couldn't hide the sky.
Yeah.
They had to give you all the distractions, all the programs, all the look here, look there, right?
Yeah.
Attachments to divert you from looking up. And when you think about, when I was never interested in learning which one was the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper, I was like, found that always confusing. I'm like, why didn't I want to do that? Like,
I know.
And like all these years from 19, like 40 years. The first one, I had my first astrology reading at 19, only because my roommate was the daughter of this well-known astrologer. And then is that 40 years ago? But yeah, I mean, before I found that it wasn't correct, which was around, when I was 50, I guess. So then to go, wait a second, I never looked up almost 30 years to look at the stars that are the constellations. Is where we get the so-called signs from. Just, like even like the basic language, if you look at, we don't even use the word sign anymore in Skystrology, because it's not really what a sign is. A sign. Like, I see a sign that XYZ, or this is a sign that you could be this, sick, or this is a sign that you got the flu. It's not the stars, the constellations. The constellations are a language, a celestial language that our ancestors used so they could live in tune with nature. So when they saw these stars that were always together, fixed, then they could say, oh, when we see those stars together fixed, and we went fishing one day and we got loads of fish, but then we didn't see those stars together and we went fishing and we didn't get any fish. So we're going to wait for these stars. Oh, they look a little bit like, a lion or whatever. Or let's, what, I don't really know. I don't, say to know how they made that up. But the fact is that with the naked eye, there's stories that can be received and told. And I always say to my students, if we get downloads now, can you imagine what kind of downloads our ancestors got?
I couldn't imagine.
In the dark, with nothing artificial.
Yeah, like take away all the, the satellites and the GPS and signposts, right? Like that was their GPS, the actual sky. Like that was their navigation system. Even like from boating to to riding horses to camels to all of it. Like what they needed was the sky or the stars.
To agriculture as well.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's where it begins, to reconnect with that knowledge, that collective consciousness, even, if you will, right? When we look past the programming or the systems that have been put in place or trying to replace right,
so true.
our organic selves, right, with the whole materialistic wave. And you know what I was just thinking about as well is with Neptune just returning to Pisces, where it was 166 years ago, where there was also a time where people started to understand, at the time was not the word, but to understand that not everything that we see is the most important thing. Not everything, the life is not only material. Right?
Yep. It's huge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that there is
Abundance is the earth,
non-material.
right?
Sorry?
I was saying abundance is nature, right? Nature is naturally abundant, and that's what we have to learn from. We've been taught materialism and, how much we have, right? Like in terms of quantifying things and putting worth or putting a price on stuff. Like, it's coming back to the natural world. It's coming back to that connection with the earth, and community, and everything that you've said, like, is so spot on. And I think that's why also we're being called to to have this conversation right now, to help other people tap into that inner awareness of their own interconnection to the earth, to nature, right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, exactly. Because, and it's great. That's what's so amazing to be here now, right? To be here now in this return of Neptune to the top of the sky. And it's just at the beginning, which, also it's like location, location, location. It was a famous TV show, probably even went to the States, about how it's important to have the right location for a shop or anything. But location, location. When I think of that, I think, wow, when Western is telling people, oh, soon Jupiter's going to be in Aries. And I'm like, really? Okay. So if, besides the fact that it's not true, the fact is that Neptune returning now to Pisces and being there for, I think I charted 16 years, but for being there at the beginning, then we are at the beginning of the journey of this energy, of flowing with this energy. And that's what we kind of discovered with our calendar, the community now almost 2 years, where we know where the energies actually are. And so it's just nothing like experience, right? To feel it in your being. The change from water element to fire, or the change from fire to earth, like in Leah, in Virgo, right here. So yeah, that's for me the basis of Skystrology, is what the person feels when they can let go of the programming and can reconnect it, if you will, to a parts of themselves that have always been and never went anywhere.
It's always been. Yes, that's so true. It's removing all those layers into overlays.
Yeah.
So you could hear yourself, so you could hear your truth and know who you are at the core. Yeah.
Yeah, we always say get rid of the noise, and the noise is real, right?
Yeah.
It's so interesting. So gosh, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to you being a part of the community for, it's so funny. It's been quite interesting journey, because a few years ago, I was like the only one kind of talking this Skystrology stuff, because I didn't really jump on the 13th sign, because when I thought 13th, it just like, okay, so what does that mean? Because I was just so devastated, to be honest.
I know. I think we all were, right?
I'm like, what? And so that's what, by me kind of thinking, okay, I'm not going to jump on the next bandwagon. That was my feeling, right? I didn't want to like jump on the next bandwagon about that. And so by not doing that, but exploring 13th sign, with an open mind, exploring true sidereal, exploring Vedic, exploring stargazing, and having the life experience at the same time, being there when my mother passed, being the one who rectified her birth time and could see also the connections between myself and my mother, and how slowly the difference of, thinking that I had three heavenly bodies in Sagittarius and one in Scorpio, but not three in a Fucus and one in Libra, right? So it's like,
Right.
wow, okay. And that takes time, you just don't like, oh, all the time get it. I mean, you might get it for you. And I got it, maybe the download, the coast, but I'm still, the skeptical part of me is like, okay, well, let's test it. And is it just me? Right? What about, does it work for somebody else? How are they experiencing this? Right? And, it was, it's so funny because the journey, what you said, you stopped giving, you couldn't give the readings anymore because they weren't in your integrity. And my funny thing is, I didn't start giving readings to the point where I literally just had my studio and my flat in, Egypt, but I didn't have a place to live basically, or to sleep in London, because I was looking at the sky and trying to make sense of this new concept before I felt secure enough to say, oh, I can do this or I can do that.
Right.
Right. And literally you come to, like, I went to the border of, but I was putting all the courses together and I was making it make sense for me first before I could say, oh, you need to do that. So I would doing like beta, like in a group of like light workers and things, but I never felt, oh, I'm the one to be, a real astrologer or a Skystrologer. And that's what I feel so drawn to you, um, to invite you into this space, because we do have a calling. And, you'll find a lot of people, I always see this, and the people that there's a lot of intuitive souls and there's a lot of people here to serve. And it's about which energetics are you serving with and why your journey has brought you to this point. There is true magic and order and harmony in the cosmos, in our sky. And when we look up, is the first step into reconnecting with it. And even if it's just to balance what is going on this earth plane, right? That is the first way to really reconnect to something that is, bigger than ourselves and connected.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, like, I'm getting kind of like downloads as you're saying that, is like, really it's the embodiment, right, of what the energies represent. You were kind of alluding to that earlier. You were mentioning like, it's like feeling what it means, right? We have been so conditioned to like want to learn things and apply it through our mind, through the mental state of understanding concepts. Like, even with like Western astrology, like learning, because there is a learning curve to understanding what all this means and how it all connects to dots, right? But like, to understand Jupiter and Pisces and this Neptunian aspect, like to understand the influence or the energy signatures of like how these transits move, or how it speaks to your chart. I think people get so hooked up on the dictionary meaning of what it is, and like this is what this means, but like really what I see Skystrology at is like the bridge of connecting with the ethereal realm, the actual planets in the sky. Like when you were talking about being on the Red Sea and looking up at the moon, like you're getting this full immersive experience being there in nature feeling into the energies of how it makes you feel, right? Being amongst in that connection with earth. And I think that's like the most crucial thing that we can do, is like getting out of our head and getting into our body, dropping into our heart, dropping into our soul, dropping into like, how is this moving me right now? What's coming up for me, like on a body level, like on a spiritual level, on a heart level, right? Like the experience of how this is moving through you, and not just the mental aspect of, oh, well, we're in a retrograde right now, so all these things are supposed to happen. I don't know if what I'm saying is translating, but
so high
yeah,
grading, so trans.
yeah,
Just thinking,
okay,
I'm so excited for you to be a Skystrologer.
yeah.
Because it's like, I didn't know. I knew I wanted some astrologers to, be curious about being a Skystrologer, but I didn't really know where to look and or to invite people. And so I'm just, when it's aligned and
Yeah, divine
exactly what you
alignment.
say, it's like, yes, it's speaking
Mhm.
from my heart. Just so, I mean, but I think I'm so grateful, of course. And then I just like see how magical life is. How magical life is once we are awoken to the magic of the skies, because literally that I have seen that happen, right? And I make a lot of my decisions based on what's happening in the actual sky.
Yes.
Different than
Yeah. I so
Western.
resonate with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jade. This has been an amazing first edition of speaking with astrologers and introducing you here during this time on this mothering weekend, as they say, as the moon is amongst the stars of Cancer, reaching the beehive cluster, which is all about abundance. And yeah, I look forward to all our amazing discussions that we'll be having in the method course. So take care of
Yes.
yourself and talk
Thank
soon.
you. Thank you so much. And I am so grateful to be on here having this conversation. Thank you for the invitation and the opportunity. And also grateful for just the organic alignment for how we've connected. So I'm super excited to just progress on this journey with you. So thank you, Claudette. Yeah, for just ushering that foundation for all of us to learn and expand. Thank you.
No, well, I thank the universe. Okay. Talk soon.